Let's, let's start. Well, hello, Scott O'Hara. How are you, my friend?
I'm peachy, and yourself? Are you some
Yeah,
kind of
I'm feeling pretty good
purse?
actually.
No?
Um, I've lost some weight, and as a result, I feel better within myself. I got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes before
Hmm.
Christmas, and so he said lose weight, and which I've done.
That's the time to be diagnosed, like right when everyone's about to like get together for like
Oh
New Year's
yeah,
stuff and be like,
yeah.
hey,
I
I know
was. It
everyone's about
was.
to have some fun, but not you.
You,
You
yeah. Well, it was a couple of months before Christmas, but usually around Christmas time, then in England, they have these things called mince tarts or mince pies. I don't know if you
Mhm.
know what they are, but it's
I've
fruit
seen the Great
mince.
British Baking Show. I know all about
Yeah.
your culinary
Oh, okay.
repertoire.
So yeah, it's fruit mince, and I used to love them. And they high, they've got short crust pastry, and they're quite calorific and have all the bad things in them. And
Yeah,
usually I'd eat like, you know, dozens of those over the Christmas period. I only had one.
and they're
So,
all hand delivered by Paul Hollywood too. Again,
oh
like
yeah,
my
yeah.
my
No, I
understanding.
actually I actually like the sort of industrial production of standard Sainsbury's. Sainsbury's is a supermarket. But anyway, so obviously you didn't have to cut anything back over Christmas. Did you have a good Christmas?
Yeah, it was
What
nice.
what's Christmas like in your house?
It's not in my house, first of all, so that's
Well, that's always good.
good. Yeah. No, my wife is from the Midwest, so we always
Hold on a second. I'm just going to close the door.
no, that makes sense. That's why we're doing this right now.
Yeah.
You can ask me a question, then you can just immediately leave as I start answering.
No, no,
I
no.
want you
It's
to do
just
I
that I
want you to do
really
this.
it's my daughter's upstairs. Eloise's upstairs
I
playing.
just want you to ask I want you to ask me questions, and then each time you do, I just want you to immediately leave. And I can just
Oh,
talk to
I'll do that. I'll just turn the camera off every time.
Okay,
So
cool.
you were saying that it was somewhere else
Yeah,
in
yeah. So my wife is from the Midwest, and her family always does like this big, get together over Christmas and stuff. So it's nice.
oh, so you get to
We
go
Yeah,
go
we all
there
go
for a
out
couple of
there.
days.
My sister-in-law and her family all go out there, like all like, my kids, her kids, they all get together and stuff. And it's my kids all have birthdays around the same time too. So it all just is like this big Christmas slash family together slash birthday sort of
Oh, nice.
thing.
Everything's wrapped
Yeah, we
up.
just get it all done at once, and then the rest of the year we're just like,
So
we
you
didn't do
said
anything.
Midwest. Obviously that's a term that is familiar to people that live in the States, but I've got no idea where the Midwest is.
Well, if you think about like going west,
Yeah.
it's like midway.
So what's the
No, yeah, it's like smack dab in the middle of the United States.
what's the state?
I'm not saying that.
Huh? Oh, okay. That's fine. Um, good
But
call.
but yeah,
Uh,
no, so
I'm gonna look for it now. I'm gonna make
we
it
can look
my
for it.
priority to
We can
find
do like
out
a Where's
where the
Waldo.
fuck that place is, the
Yeah,
Midwest. It's
yeah.
just, yeah, it's as I say, I mean, I'm just don't know. I don't I'm not very good with directions in general. Well, actually I think I am okay with directions, but it's like, I've lived in Kingston upon Thames for 18 years now. But then will people say somewhere outside of Kingston upon Thames, I live here. And I thought, "Well, where the fuck is that? I don't know. It's only about 10 miles down the road." But anyway, uh, So you and I know each other. We've known each other for too long, probably.
Yeah, a
Uh,
number of years. Yeah.
yeah. So we used to work at TPG together. Um, how long ago was that now?
Well, I just hit 5 years at Microsoft actually. So that long ago. It was
So 2021. And how long did you work at TPG for?
I started there in 2018.
Oh, okay. So it was like 3 years. It seemed longer.
Yeah, well, I do that to people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. During that time, you and I became friends and collaborators on a number of things, including the HTML AAM and the ARIA and HTML. Is it called that still? I can't
Yeah,
remember. Yeah,
RE and HTML.
and you essentially, I mean, I was rough riding over those specs for too long, and you came along and you actually made it more professional and more accurate, I reckon.
I mean, I filled in, like, so yeah, when I started working on this stuff, it was just after you had just left the W3C HTML task force. Um, I
Oh,
had
really?
I had
I know.
stepped in to fill your spot, so I was working on the W3C version of the HTML spec.
Ah,
Um,
that's right. I forgot about that
yeah,
one.
and then the what WG and W3C finally came to an agreement, and there's only the one spec, and then uh, talking to Leonie, she was just like, well, hey, you still want to do this spec work? Steve needs help with these with HTML AM. So yeah, I started bugging you about
I
stuff
definitely
again.
needed help, and by that time I was well, burned out was maybe an overreach, but yeah, I wasn't doing much work, and you came in and you started to do work, which was great.
Yeah,
The thing that I find though is that if you um, edit a spec or you know substantial development to a spec over time, that you sort of start to think that it belongs to you. Like, you invest yourself in it. And it took me a while to disinvest myself. It wasn't actually that hard because I mean I probably could have let it go earlier, but there was no one around that I trusted uh, until you came along. And because I think that you and I have, um, well, we don't always agree with things, and I think that you have a very sharp technical understanding of accessibility, and that was important, I think, rather than some sort of, woolly, you know, accessibility is great type thing. You actually are interested in the way stuff is implemented, and I think that's important.
yeah.
Um,
I definitely. I mean, I thought we complemented each other well on those because I definitely I learned a lot kind of by trial by fire in some of those cases too. Like, you coming on to do HTML AM, I had never worked on any like the platform mappings and stuff before, but
yeah,
basically just like, here you go, figure it out. And that was, that really gave me a lot of insight into, kind of like how things actually worked. And it wasn't just like this, like, oh, the screen reader says, it's like, well, why does the
yeah,
screen reader say that? And
yeah. Well, that's
like
why it's always been of
you see
interest.
so many arguments with like people online being like, "Oh, well, maybe the screen reader should just update." Like that, like why do they behave that way? It's just like, well, half the time they behave that way is because the browser tells them to. So,
Yeah,
when I see certain people saying like, "Oh, the screen reader should update," I'm like, "No, the browser should update.
they,
The only reason
yeah.
it behaves that way is because of what y'all put in there."
I mean, that's an important point that I pushed for a long time is that each part of part of the equation. Developers, users, and assistive tech and browsers all need to work together in order to get and a output that is meaningful. But yeah, there's always been it's fighting against this notion that, well, screen reader does X because it's wrong. It should be fixed, and sometimes it is the case. Sometimes
Yeah,
it's something else,
the truth is
and
always in the middle, really.
so I enjoyed, and I'm sure you do enjoy. Well, enjoy. Um,
Enjoy.
worked to yeah, worked to
See, this is the face of someone that enjoys things.
yeah. I can tell. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, you're such a happy, easygoing,
yeah. I'm a fucking delight.
happy-go-lucky fella.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, so filing bugs, I've always enjoyed doing that against the browsers and also against screen readers where possible, as you know. Um, but I met with Cynthia Shelley while I was in Amsterdam last week or so ago, and it was her and I that started work on what became the AAM. And I remember at the time, talking about, well, not understanding it. I mean, there was bits of documentation here, there, and everywhere, but there was no documentation for how HTML how the semantics of HTML would be implemented in accessibility tree. And I remember being told at the time by several people, influential people, that we didn't need the spec. Wasn't needed. There's always, but it was obviously just bullshit because I think that, like the 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 core IAM and the other IAMs that coming down the pipe. I mean, it is important to have that documented the same way as everything else about the implementation of HTML is documented.
I mean, I agree. I think it's kind of proven itself over time. I mean, with even like some of the work that I've been doing more recently, with the Open UI, open, working group, we came up with the proposal for the popover attributes, and
Yep.
then like the command and command for attributes and the customizable select, and we're going through and working on like menu, like a new pass at the menu element. Well, it won't be the menu element anymore because that thing has a sad and storied past, but like menu list and menu bar, like there's a lot of these things. And when working with these people who are all like they're all very, very intelligent, but it all
Yeah, I
comes
don't
down
like
to
that.
like, but how is this supposed to be mapped? What is this supposed to
Yeah.
be? And it's been great to have like these conversations with them and then codify that stuff in the spec so that then the other implementers that aren't in the room can come and actually then weigh in on the decisions that were made and then implement them in those other browsers. Because without this
Yeah.
spec, then they would just be like, well, I guess it's supposed to work this way.
Yeah. Talking about implementations, the details and summary elements, what's happened with the implementations there? Because I know when I initially, defined it, I mean, a lot of the work I did on the AEM was just looking at how it was implemented at the time and then, writing that down. But with the details and summary, I actually pushed the idea of the summary being a button, um, which is, I think, worked well in some instances, but it doesn't. Yeah. It's problematic because Apple view it, have a specific disclosure element, just triangle or whatever. They have a particular role that they're already defined for that. So.
Though, yeah, I mean, that's been kind of it's been a really interesting one that I've complained about and also advocated for. on and off over the years. I don't know where I fall on it anymore.
What's actually happened though is how it's what
It's
is that?
it's kind of a just like meh at this point, because it's a weird thing. Like in HTML, like the summary is like semantically, a caption for the details, um and because of that, it's not really considered a button, which is why you can have stuff inside of a summary that you can't put inside of a
Yeah,
button per the HTML content model. It's a little bit of like, even like calling it like a caption or a label, like to me doesn't make a whole lot of sense because like those things you can't activate or focus on,
yeah,
and yet in this
yeah,
case you can. It to me, in my perfect world, and I don't know if this will ever come to pass, what I would really like to have happen is us actually um kind of get the best of both worlds. I mean, we can't do a whole lot to change it at this point just because it is like so out there now, and I
yeah,
don't want to do anything that would break the web. And yet also, I'm having a really hard time thinking about how it would break if we were to say, remove the button roll from the summary element in and of itself, but instead made it a button part in the shadow DOM that,
yeah,
would then be labeled with whatever text was next to it, because you
yeah.
can label buttons. Look it up.
But the issue with that, well, part of the issue, because I remember we were discussing this. I was discussing this on a ticket with Simon Peters, I don't know. Yeah, many years ago. But it was like the well, people wanted to add, there was like as you say, a summary could contain another button, for example, or
Inputs. Yeah, I had a fun issue that I found a while ago where if you put an input inside of a summary and then you started typing in it and you added spaces, it would just toggle
oh,
the
really?
thing opening because the space key would bubble up. So it would just
Yeah.
constantly be opening and closing the associated content. I was like, this is what you wanted? This?
Well, that's a good reason not to do it. I mean, but
Uh,
what I found was what I had. What I was trying to do was because I remember that they were trying to take or the original idea I think Hixie had was that the control for opening and closing would be the summary, but it would be, as you say, it would be like an additional thing within the shadow DOM. But the issue still is that if you do that, that resolves the problem of having, other uh, controls in there. But what it doesn't do is provide a clear expectation or clear path to for an accessible name for
well, yeah, so and this is something that's a bit getting back to our prior conversation of, well, whose fault is this? Who's to do what? Like there's an argument to be made that, with what I was saying, like you could put anything inside of the summary element, and then that would be what labels the button part. So then if you had, whatever your label is, XYZ, whatever you want in there, that would be all of its own label, which would then give the button the name of whatever this is, which is then like two nodes in the accessibility tree of like, the content and then the other content right after it.
yeah,
Screen readers arguably could come through and kind of like what some of them do with forms on the web now, where if something is associated with it and you like are using like the virtual cursor to get through things, it will just kind of like bypass it. You'll just go right to the form instead of the label and then the form again.
yeah,
They could do that. So it would be two nodes in the accessibility tree, but it would be read as if it was still one. Or if there was important stuff that needed to be called out, that could then be where the screen reader is like, there's other things in here. We need to make people sure that people are aware of it. And then they could be still like it would be redundancy, but it'd be redundancy for a reason. so that you could hear the full thing to toggle. And then if there was like a heading or if there was an individual input in the summary, label parts, then people could get to that individually as well. But it's all theoretical at this point of
Yeah.
how that could
I'm still
happen.
not,
And
yeah. I remember at the time that the like I must admit the way I think about these things is extremely simplistically, but I was thinking, well, if there was something inside the Shadow DOM, if there was this built-in control that needed to be named, that you could have a label inside the summary that that referenced the thing, but then
mm,
you know you can't reference it without, but I was just thinking about some way to clearly say this is the label for this control. The rest of the stuff in the summary is not a label.
mhm.
Maybe a label for something else.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a different way of
Yeah.
going about it as well. I think it all just comes down to like if anything's to be done about it at this point, it has to be the only thing that can be done is just the only thing that could possibly be done would be something that just wouldn't break the content for anybody else
So
and how it's
so on
implemented right now.
Windows, it's still exposed as a button.
Interestingly, not really. Although like some screen readers will still announce it as a button,
Yeah,
but summary element is actually one of the elements in all of HTML AAM that doesn't have, because there's no consistent role and there's no like explicit ARIA role for summary.
yeah,
It's actually mapped as like a computed role of like HTML dash summary. That's how it is in the spec. And
yeah.
that's kind of a signal that like, every platform's like kind of allowed to do their own thing.
Own
So,
thing.
like, yeah,
Well, it's not
Firefox,
ideal
I
though, is
believe,
it?
exposes it as like actual like summary. Like it exposes it as a summary role. Like you said, like disclosure triangle is how it's exposed in some. Um,
But what are the what are the intrinsic characteristics of the summary role? I mean, where does the interactive, part of the interaction get? The fact is the summary is that you click it or press on it to get it to open and close. How is that conveyed
I mean, it's kind of up to the screen readers to do that at this
to
point.
do that?
And
Yeah,
that's why, some of them still do, even though it's not mapped that way, they will still expose it as a button because that
that
just
makes
makes
most sense to
sense.
them. Yeah,
But some of the other ones where they're more literal with the mapping and they will say summary, but they will still, hook it up in a way where, the expanded state can be, exposed, that it's
yeah,
still, an interactive element. Like those things can still be conveyed. I mean, as I'm more
well,
saying this for anybody listening than you specifically, but like all the like you can expose anything
yeah,
in the accessibility tree. It's just what have like the screen readers then decided to do with that. So
yeah,
you can put any ARIA attribute on any HTML elements, but if the browser and browsers may or may not actually expose that to the accessibility tree, and then it's
yeah.
up to the screen reader to do something with it. It's when the browsers don't expose the information that then the screen readers are SOL. And that's what's more back to what we were talking about
SOL?
before. It's just like, well, if the browser doesn't expose it, then how can the screen reader be at fault for not exposing it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's I don't even want to think about it.
Well,
One of
then we shouldn't be talking about it.
yeah, I know. It just starts to do my head in. Um, One of the other things that I talked with Brian Cardell recently, and he was talking about the heading offset attribute
Yeah.
and thoughts on that.
I mean, it's the closest thing I think we're gonna get to the heading outline. I think that
Yeah,
that was I think that has potential to be a good one. Like it's one of those things where I think that as long as people can like wrap their heads around it and they can understand where it's to be used, then it will be helpful. It will be good for people to know that it won't modify any ARIA headings at all. So even more of a reason
Oh,
to
really?
use, yeah,
Yeah.
you really need to
So you
use
over if you've got an explicit role and level, then it won't mess with that.
yeah, because ARIA takes precedence over
Yeah.
almost everything.
That's
So
interesting because then it really, given the direction of traffic where ARIA is being used more and more, which is not a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not,
no.
well, is actually probably a bad thing. That unless they use the HTML headings, then they won't be able to use the offset or the
Right.
offset one.
Yeah, it's really a with a lot of some of the new features that are coming to HTML, it really is more of a you should use the native features. You should
Yeah.
stop using
Well, that's
ARIA.
good.
Like, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, there might be some that even would debate me on this, but I think for many basic cases of like dialogues at this point too, like
Yeah.
there's no reason to be using ARIA. There's no reason to be rolling your own. I mean, for
But
some of the
people
most
just like to roll.
oh yeah, but I mean, get wheels
Well,
for
now
your
we've got
chariot.
AI to build our own custom stuff with. So yeah. It, I mean, when Brian, to be honest, as I said to him, I hadn't looked at it. I mean, because I was involved in the document outline crap for so long, and that once it got into some stable place in what WGHTML, I was thinking, great, I can walk away now, and disinvest myself. And I suppose that's that's what I've done. Disinvested myself. Like I haven't been following as closely as that. So I mean, I sort of knew there was this offset thing, but essentially how it works is that you have it on a container element that contains headings. Can it contain other things as well?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but it will only impact the headings and then basically yeah, you can adjust the heading levels based on yeah, the heading offset, heading reset attributes. So if you want your headings to maintain, what level you set them at, they you hit the reset and they stay at what they're supposed to be. But then yeah, you set the offset to be, specific numbers and it will basically add or subtract.
So if it's a
Um,
one, it'll be say it's got a level heading level offset of one. It'll if it's one, it'll become two. If it's two, it'll
right.
become three. Yeah. Oh, that's yeah. I mean, it sounds reasonable. I never really understood, and I'm sure there's reasons why and I understand why they want to be able to have that ability um, to set headings, because that way you can add anything to the DOM at any particular point, and you know, it'll have the right heading level. That's the idea.
The right,
But I
right.
just wondered why they couldn't do it in JavaScript or something. It just seemed over engineering to me. But you know,
I mean, some would argue that doing things in JavaScript is over engineering too, if they can get, if you can get a more performant thing from the browser. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, that's
there's an
true.
argument to be made for, a lot of this stuff is just like, well, why do we need any of this? People are using custom elements, people are, using JavaScript, and I think that there is an interesting line that I haven't really found to be like very materialized for me yet. But sometimes when we are thinking up some of these new features, I'm like, well, is this something that the platform really needs? Like, do we need to like
Yeah,
really hit like all the use cases, or like are there going to like um, it's like the 80/20 rule. Talking with Aaron Leventhal, who was over on Chrome's accessibility for quite a while. He and I would talk about that quite a bit of like, what's the most important things that need to be done? Let's make sure that
yeah.
those can get done. And then the stuff that's, beyond that is just like, well, is that really what we need to get into this? Is that like,
So, what do you think is important for the HTML, for native HTML to continue to
um,
evolve and become more accessible?
I think that at this point, I think that, for any new feature that is added, that we just take a hard look at it and be like, what problem is it solving? And are we solving it for, all users? I think that's, one thing that people often forget about in accessibility is that it's not just about people using screen readers, but, others as
Oh,
well.
really? I never realized that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, weird,
No,
isn't
it's
it?
just that I don't know. I read link, I sort of go to LinkedIn quite often, or any of the social media sites, and then on occasion you'll have somebody proclaim that accessibility isn't just around screen readers, and I know that, you know that, most people who work in the industry
You would
know
think,
that.
like it feels silly for me to even be saying that. And yet, um, like we were, thinking about some new features for, like a component that like, would have like use arrow key behavior instead of like using the tab key and stuff. And
Yeah,
it comes down to like, well, what kind of component is this supposed to be? Like how would someone using like that is used to just using the keyboard, how would they even know to switch up their navigation pattern to use arrow keys? And then like, talking to some people who are like, well, doesn't the screen reader tell them that? I'm like, yeah, but what if the person's not using a screen reader? How can
yeah,
how can they see it? How can they know that like, why am I not getting to this stuff?
yeah.
And at the same time, I also like to think that a lot of people can figure this stuff out. So it's, if you can't get to it with the tab key, then you use other keys. And eventually, you can identify these things as long as they're styled the same.
I
And
mean,
that's where it becomes difficult because everyone
yeah.
wants to style something differently. So then something that should be an understandable pattern becomes more difficult to understand because you're like, well, someone did this different. So how does it behave? I don't know. Um,
Yeah.
that's really the difficult part about a lot of this, in my opinion, is that, if everything was truly standardized and that it wasn't just like, the code that was standardized, but also the visual aesthetic, then arguably things would be a lot easier. But because anyone can style anything to look like anything, then it just becomes a guessing game to some people of like, well, what is this? How is this supposed to behave?
Well, that's I think that's part of the reason why people have created rolled their own because they couldn't get it to look like they wanted to. But it does seem to be that the design aspects of the various controls are becoming more um, customizable. So,
Again,
which
good and
is
bad, good and bad things there. Yeah.
I think is a good thing. I mean, remember I did this presentation in 2010 at Frontiers, talking about like the new HTML5 controls and how basically at that time, I think a lot of them were implemented in Opera in particular, which the rendering engine, which was Presto, I can't remember. But anyway,
All blink now.
yeah, well, exactly, it died on the vine. But I've got this slide with pictures of it, and everything just looks shit. And so that's why people weren't using these things. But um, CSS to the rescue. But talking
Yeah.
of CSS, tell us about what you know or your thoughts on the implementation of tab interfaces in CSS.
Oh, um,
Isn't there some move that I think we were talking about this before about the implementation of adding ARIA attributes to indicate, to provide
Yeah,
accessible
this is
information.
largely with the scroll markers in
Yeah.
CSS. And that's a newer feature that was uh, I think it was last year's Google I/O that it was really kind of like pushed out to the announced as being intent to implement and that people could try it out in Chrome browsers. But yeah, that is an interesting thing that there's been a lot of discussion on in the Open UI and the ARIA working group of like, exactly what to do there. Because yeah, with some of the new stuff that's coming through CSS working group, there has been, you know, more of an idea of like, well, can we get CSS to do things that, HTML can't? Can we create tabs or carousels using CSS only and
It
you
was
know,
carousels. Yes.
yeah, and inject, these pseudo elements into the UI that then have implicit ARIA roles and then how do you name those things? Because it's very, like it
But
becomes a lot of like browser magic to have to do that because otherwise you basically have to name it using like CSS pseudo content and that can be weird. But
what I don't understand though, and perhaps you may have be able to explain it, is that why would we have to go down the route of implementing the addition of ARIA attributes? Why can't it just the particular element that they're injecting will have a set of royal states and properties that are implicit that are explicitly defined, not as ARIA attributes.
well, so maybe that's so no, what I was saying is that they would be implicit ARIA attributes. And maybe that's like we've been talking about it a lot more using that terminology lately, where like all HTML elements or all HTML elements that have accessibility mappings, they kind of get referred to as having implicit ARIA mappings.
Right.
Because everything goes back to core AAM, which is
Yeah.
ARIA. So that's what these things would be too, is that they would have implicit ARIA mappings. They would have implicit roles and states and properties, but
So they wouldn't have physical.
they wouldn't, yeah, you wouldn't have, and that's again both depending on how you look at it, a pro and a con, because you wouldn't have to do anything outside of using CSS to get all these, scroll markers with the
Yeah.
necessary, roles and states on them. But also, if you wanted to use the CSS to build something that really didn't fit into one of the patterns that they had defined, then there's no way to change those roles or states or properties. It's
Oh,
it's
so you
kind of
can't inject into the shadow, like, yeah.
you can't change those elements. And there's even there was some talk at some point. I'm honestly a little out of the loop on it, but there was some talk at some point about like how there also needed to be like a JavaScript API so that a developer would know like when one of these things was actually like clicked on or something. Some component libraries like they need to be able to understand like what the state of this stuff is so that they can use it to communicate with other patterns, in the component library or whatnot. And there was no real good way to do that. But I think that might have been solved. I don't know.
So in you know, sort of in general though, I mean, what is your feeling about um using CSS becoming more semantic? That's what we're talking about, isn't it?
It's one of those things where, I mean, CSS always had some levels of semantics to it.
Yeah.
And you can't not admit that and then also be like, but display none, like
Yeah.
it removes things from the tree, visibility hidden removes things from the tree, visibility visible, you can put it back in.
Yeah.
There, like lists and whether or not they're exposed as lists, or even the list markers, like there's really fundamentally no difference between an OL, a UL, and a menu element, but for the
Yeah.
fact of what their markers are. And guess what? Those markers are defined in CSS.
Yeah, right.
So there are, my opinion, and only my opinion, is that I would rather there be less in CSS than more. But I also understand that CSS is a lot easier to work with than in some case. Like there are no responsive roles, for instance. If
Mm,
you have a UI where on larger viewport sizes you want it to be one type of component, and on smaller viewport sizes you want it to be a different type of component, there's no good way to do that without some kind of like JavaScript or CSS hackery. Like I was even tooling around at one point of using like divs that contained like one div that contained another one, but on like the topmost div it was like the role that I wanted it to be on like large screens, and then on the inner role it was the one that I didn't want, I only wanted to be on small screens, and then using like CSS visibility hidden to hide the top one, but then show the bottom one, and then flip it
right.
around based on the viewport size. So like I was had to define both of those separately in the DOM though. And that was just sloppy. I had a whole blog post I was going to write about it. I never actually published it because I was just like, this is dumb. Don't ever do this. The fact I'm even talking about it right now is just letting you all know that I'm dumb. That's not a good idea. But
Well, no, I mean it's
otherwise it's just JavaScript, or it's like completely like ripping out the DOM and re-putting it back in to
yeah.
get like the different components that you want, or having them both in there and just simply switching off display none between the two, and that's sloppy too. There's no good way to do that. So is there use cases? Like I would be lying if I said there were none. But it becomes like a conversation of like, what is the best for the user? And when we look around the internet and we see just how misused and misunderstood accessibility is, um,
Yeah.
it's hard to it's hard to like again, there's some people that really know what they're doing, and then there's some people that really know what they're doing and care, and then there's some people that really care but they don't know what they're doing. And that can often be some of the most dangerous, because they're
Mm,
trying to do a good thing but they haven't really understood the space, they haven't talked to users, they don't really understand what might be technically possible is not necessarily technically good. So
right.
giving them bigger foot guns is like, I don't know, like people like their feet. They don't like having bullet holes in their feet. I think that we can universally agree on that as a society, that like bullet holes in the feet are a bad thing.
Well, yeah, as long as but if they're in somebody else's feet, which is often the case, then it's not so bad for you, is it?
I
Uh,
mean, depends, but
Another thing that I've picked up on it recently, and I looked into a little bit, is HTML in Canvas. Have you seen that?
yeah, there was a presentation on that to the RA working group maybe about a month or two ago. Time's weird. I don't know. But yeah, no, that's it's kind of making good on a promise that I know a long time ago I talked about this with Mark Sadecki, who had worked on
Yes.
Canvas and trying to get the accessibility going on for it. And um, this seems to finally be making good on some of those ideas where you could basically, write your HTML in the canvas and indicate what you wanted like the fallbacks to be, so that
Yeah.
it could then actually be exposed, because otherwise, yeah, it's all just bitmap.
Well, yeah, I think it's more than just a fallback because
Right.
you interact with the actual stuff in the DOM in the subtree, and it, it passes that information to like you will see. So like if you focus on a button inside the HTML canvas, you will actually, in the DOM it focuses on the button, but it also shows that the button has been focused in the
Right.
canvas, which is, I mean, I had a look at it and I thought it was quite nice. The only questions I really had, which I couldn't answer for myself, or the immediate question was that how would it, how would script magnifiers deal with it? Does it, does the positioning and is that information because it's the same thing. I mean, HTML elements have a positioning information that's available to screen magnifiers. Does
Mhm.
stuff in that still have that representation of the visual display? It's interesting.
My biggest question about it when we were hearing the presentation on it was in a lot of cases of what might be referred to as canvas, but it's not actually canvas.
Yeah.
Like an editable canvas, so that the like some apps have where people can users can come along and they can just drag and drop things anywhere and then they can reposition it anywhere. And my hope was that with this, like this could then be a tool for that. And that basically reconfiguring of the DOM underneath the hood would be possible.
Oh, yeah, if you drag
Um,
something on the canvas, you mean,
yeah, and
or
then like if you
move
put
it
like
in the DOM.
if you take like paragraph here and paragraph
Yeah.
here and then you flip them, that the DOM would actually flip. But that's I mean that's a very specific use case, but one that I could see being very useful with this, but I don't think, at least at the time they were presenting on it, that wasn't possible yet. Hopefully it could be a feature in the future though, because I think that that's one of the things that I see happen a lot with these again, like editable canvases. People can drag and drop their stuff anywhere, is that unless you really know what you're doing, or the application has taken a lot of thought into making sure that the visual layouts and the programmatic layout are actually in sync, you can get some really
Right.
weird reading sequences then. But
Yeah. The potential's there for that. I mean, I, I, I see the immediate use or a use case for this HTML and canvas is the creation of things like apps and things like that in on mobile, for example, is that because you can control the effectively you're showing people a picture. But then I was thinking, well, really, the it's still a picture anyway. It's still a graphical representation of the DOM. It's just in a through a different medium.
mhm.
Um, I, I have thought that this was going to happen for years. I mean, when the Canvas was originally being not implemented, well, both implemented and defined uh, by Hixie. I remember at the time that he was, and I think it said in the What WG spec at one time that basically that Canvas is just you can't have interactive content in Canvas. That was the bottom line. He didn't want the for user interfaces to be built in Canvas. And I always thought, well, it's not so much what you want, it's what's going to happen.
Yeah, and that's
And
kind of, yeah,
yeah,
it's
I had
again,
A Google alert set up for HTML and Canvas for years. So it happened a lot slower than I thought it would, but it's eventually it's come around to that. So I'm interested to see, but do have I am optimistic about it because it's actually in the development of it, they have thought about the accessibility.
I think that yes, and I think it's actually worth calling that out because I know for a real long time at least it seemed to feel like accessibility like really needed to kick and scream to get heard of at the
Yeah.
table for some of these things. And I mean, I don't think everything's perfect yet. And like, not just around accessibility. I'm sure you could talk about that for many different types of, subtopics within a particular
Yeah.
feature. But for what it's worth, at least from what I've seen, and again, speaking primarily from, the number of years now that I've been working with, the open UI folk, is that
Yeah.
accessibility has been, there from the start, you know.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, much, I mean, maybe even to some of the chagrin of like some of those people, because I mean, when I started working in open UI, they were talking about popover, but it was as the pop-up element. And I came in and basically blew that all up. And I was just like, it's gotta be something else. It's gotta be an attribute. And it took a little while, and a lot of people in that room were just like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" And they were quick to think that.
Yeah.
It's I think
I'm sure they still think me. The
yeah,
fuck
well,
is
they
this guy?
should. I'm a garbage person, but
Yeah.
you know, it
Um,
all worked out, and I think that it's a testament to how much people do think about and care about accessibility now, that they didn't just brush off the things that were being brought to them. Like they were like, okay, well, no, let's consider it. Like you're saying that this isn't a good idea. Like, what do we
well,
need to do?
I think part and this sort of speaks to what I was talking about before, is that having people that that have expertise or understanding of the technical aspects of accessibility, it it's useful to have those people such as yourself in the room with um, in these discussions, because I think a lot of the pushback was in the early days, at least in when I was young, not when I was younger. That the A lot of the pushback was because you had basically non-technical people saying accessibility, it needed to be considered, and but not providing that technical insight into what it meant.
Right.
So yeah. Um,
I mean that there's still some of that though. I mean, I don't want to
oh,
get
sure.
too into that, but there's absolutely still some of that in our industry right now too, where um, I don't know. I think it's interesting. There are some topics that, you could go into too, where, just like some people really want certain features that will, absolutely help out like some people with disabilities, but they don't always realize that like sometimes those things will actually negatively affect somebody else with a different
I mean, yeah.
disability. And it's interesting. There's been a lot of it's been slow movement, but it's looking promising. Um, that's all browsers, hopefully in the not too distant future, might all like treat, for instance, like elements that have like an overflow scroll. Those might all actually be um, focusable. People might actually be able to get to all of those and like navigate them with the keyboard.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
but at the same time, as much as that's needed for someone that is using keyboard only, there's been plenty of chatter online about screen reader users who don't like that an element that's only in the focus order for scrolling is now in the focus order because it's an extra thing. They don't need it. Um,
Right.
so it's like, well, how do you solve that problem? You have to make somebody unhappy, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I've always enjoyed making people unhappy.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean it's a good time.
I've revealed the rogues gallery. It's funny because every time I say rogues, it always comes out as rose or roads in the I get AI well, it says it's AI. I get a automated service to create the initial captioning, and then I've got to go through. I spent hours and hours, I reckon, just reading, rereading everything and trying to decipher what was said because half the time, it doesn't, yeah, it just comes up with odd things. But anyway, I don't even know why I mentioned that.
Mm,
Yeah, sorry. So that's what happens. Rose Gallery, top left.
that's Dr. Swallow.
That's top. You are the first person. It is Dr. Swallow, and
Yeah.
it's um I think that was actually taken at when recently at it's a picture from Lloydie actually. Cut down picture of Lloydie, but
It
it
looks
was
like people are trying to grab his face.
yeah, it was just like it's all hands.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Went through an all hands meeting and it was just hand like they're just being chucked at him.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, and he
That's
loves
weird.
it.
That's a weird
Um,
thing.
yeah, so David is one of the people that, as you know, is a close friend of mine. And I hope to have him on the fireside soon. We kept trying to get it together, but it hasn't happened as yet. But it's always I've always got him in my back pocket.
I
Uh,
I really liked working with David. He was
yeah,
I wish that we get to talk more, honestly. I'm real rubbish about actually reaching out to people, but he's
yeah,
always
I know.
yeah, well yeah, you know.
The first, couple of years, I just thought you were being, you didn't like me. But then
Oh,
I just
that too.
realized, I just, no, that's, I'm over egging it. I mean, I didn't, but who's next?
I actually don't know. I don't know if it's the picture or
Yeah,
what.
well, I sort of, the problem with these pictures is that I do tend to distort them. But that is a guy called Homer Gaines. You may have
Oh,
heard.
yeah, no, I know Homer. Yeah, I did not
Yeah.
recognize him from that picture though.
Yeah, that was the first time I met him. I was at Accessory TO last year.
I've only ever seen his profile picture. I don't know if we've ever actually met in person. And if we have, then oops, sorry.
What was the
I
but yeah,
think we
I
have.
can't say that. Well, I'm hopeless like that, Scott. Don't worry. I mean, I see people like Wendy Reed. I was talking to Wendy Reed a couple of weeks ago, and the last time I remember seeing her was at TPAC in Seville, and that was a couple of years ago. But I talked to her at Accessory TO, which was like 6 months ago or 8 months ago. So. Anyway, but yeah, but I met him there. I can't say we had a conversation. He was presenting there. I missed his presentation. The only presentation I actually saw of that I enjoyed was Eric Bailey in the opposite corner. Next person.
That is Henny Swan.
No,
No?
no, it's the Good Witch,
Oh.
Glenda
Well,
Sims.
I'm gonna say that the glasses threw me off there then, because I thought
Yeah,
that was
and
Henny.
also is she's sort of stretched out, but she's a recent interviewee on the fireside, and sporting her gift that I sent her. So yeah, she looks pretty cool. I like that design. A11Y. Uh, Glenda, I didn't realize, but she's the Chief Information Accessibility Officer at DQ,
Oh,
which sounds like
I just know that
a
she's a witch.
good title. Don't know what it actually means, but I mean, Glenda's been around for yonks and
Long
she
time.
does a lot of good work. Um, Despite the fact that I don't particularly like the company, but that's just a purely you know companies, people all go on my shit list, but my shit list has no real there's no real uh, reasoning behind it. It's just an
So your
emotion.
shit list is full of shit, is what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
essentially. It just
Cool.
gives me something to do. I could just move people on and off. I mean, I can't say anybody here has been on my shit list, so Some have been waiting in the wings, perhaps, but not actually on the main shit list. And you haven't been on my shit list either, so you're lucky. Uh, Next person, you should know this.
Sarah Higley.
Yeah. And again, that was from Exorcist because all I do is I just go and look at my old photos and see, I'll think, find people who you might have an idea of. Sarah does a lot of work in, does she work for Microsoft as well?
Yeah, yeah, she's over on the Fluent UI component library.
Yeah,
And
so
she
she,
comes to a
oh,
lot of the RA meetings and the Open UI meetings too. She is
oh, excellent.
I mean, I don't there's she does a lot, and the internet is a better place for the efforts that she has put into it, honestly.
Cool. I remember, I remember this was a couple of XS3 ago, and we were sitting in the hotel chatting, and Sarah was there, and she described myself and I think Adrian and a few others as like old school, like the next like that she and some others were the next generation, and I felt a bit. Well, I mean, I didn't, you know, I just don't like to be called old, essentially, which is what I am. It's,
So
it's
you
always
would
the
not
process.
like it if I started calling you Old Steve from now on.
Oh, well, people call me Uncle Steve, which is sort of the
Yeah, same,
next.
same. Okay, Old Steve.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, I don't mind that. I mean, it's just it's just a realistic view of what I am. But I was like, I suppose what the thinking that I was part of the past and not part of the current, you know,
Mm.
crop just sort of made me feel a bit, yeah.
So you were sad that you were on the
Yeah. Well, I'm
next
always, yeah.
generation.
Yeah. Wish I was young again. Talking
Mm.
about young, do you know who is in the bottom corner? You worked with him, I think.
Did I?
Yeah, maybe. He was there at TPG. I don't know how long for, and I can't remember. His name is he's a
Is
Canadian. He's got a book written about him by his sister.
is that Ben?
No, it's Mike Begani.
No, then yeah. I don't know if we worked together. If we did, I'm a bad coworker.
Yeah, well, he was he didn't do much work. No, that's not true. I think I can't even remember if I managed him or not, but anyway, I've continued. He left TBG, now lives in Portugal and is doing accessibility stuff um, in Europe, and I remained good friends with him.
Is the picture right before you sent him a t-shirt? Or
No, no. I think that it was in response to like I had a fight like when I was going to Netherlands. I just sat on the toilet in the
off to a great start, this story?
yeah.
Toilet
I
story.
was sitting on the toilet
Making your shit list.
in a in the waiting area, and I looked up and I noticed there was a mirror straight across from the toilet. So I just took a snap. I didn't show anything, you know, but that his photo was a response to that. I didn't have my top off, by the way. But obviously, I was sitting on the toilet, so I had my trousers down, but you couldn't see anything. I'll show you the picture. Uh,
Great, can't wait.
yeah, yeah. When I was in when I was in the
I
Netherlands,
want the file name to be Old Toilet Steve.
yeah, yeah, okay. Um, I was in the Netherlands for a conference for the NCDT conference, and I met up with this person I've known for a long time called Rianne Vietveld.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Didn't
she's
you do WordPress stuff?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. She's largely, you know, well, she said she's retired now. She was asking me why I hadn't retired yet, and
I
I
ask
said, well,
myself
you
that every
know,
day.
I've got kids.
Yeah, no, same reason for me.
Yeah, and I've got kids and I've got a fucking huge mortgage. I can't, by the time I'm 70, I think I'll have it all paid off. But
Oh,
but anyway, she saw that picture. She inadvertently, I was showing her a picture of that Adrian sent me of him and Carl at CSUN because I didn't go to CSUN this year, and I always like to go to CSUN, but I didn't go because of I didn't feel safe going to America at this point. Um, but inadvertently, she saw that picture and she was horrified, even though it didn't. And I tempted her, like I was trying to show her and say, "Look, you can't see anything." And she said, "I don't want to see it." I felt bad. It's like
do you have that photo on one of your t-shirts, your HTML t-shirts?
what
Yeah.
the photo of me on the toilet?
Yeah.
No, no. It's in my private collection. I share with other connoisseurs such as yourself.
You should just get
I
a t-shirt of that and just like specking it. Like that's all it
Yeah,
says.
yeah. It's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Uh, next up, there's a twofer.
Yeah, we got Adrian and Bruce there.
Yeah, that was at SOTB, State of the Browser last, or in March, I think it was. I can't remember. They happen so often these days. And as we all know, Adrian is a well-known entity, same as Bruce, and both of them have been on the fireside. So, um, for those who haven't listened to their interviews, they're there. Uh, Next person,
Is this Mike Smith?
it is Mike Smith.
I've only ever seen a photo of him before, so and
Well,
it
this is
didn't look
yeah.
exactly like that, but yeah, for whatever reason, I got that
It's
one.
not a particularly good photo because he looks a bit sort of wizened, but I don't think he looks well. I mean, he's getting older like all of us, but I think it's like when I did the interview with him, the fireside chat. He for some reason he just wanted it all in like he was black and white. It was in black and
Oh,
white.
so he's like the new Spider-Man No Ear show.
Yeah, but you may be able to see because what I'm trying to do now as well is to get sort of product placement in there from the HTML store. And you'll see he asked me to make in some DEI harder stickers, and that's one on his laptop.
Yeah.
Um, so again, Mike has been interviewed, and Mike has been a long term. I've known him for many, many years, since 2008, and he has been always helpful. He's been one of the most helpful people that and uh, technically minded, and both technically minded and helpful people that works at W3C.
Yeah.
So, and you know Mike as well, and
Yeah, he's always I've always found him, I mean, we don't work a lot together. I mean, and by work together, I mean like through GitHub issues and stuff, but
yeah,
like anytime he ever says something where like he like has a question or like he doesn't agree with something, it's always been like, "Oh, we should pay attention to this. What's going on?" So, yeah,
yeah.
I've always
Oh, he's a very
liked,
thoughtful and yeah, and
yeah.
he has a considered view on things, which I find really helpful. But I mean, he helped me a lot during the HTML5 days and getting stuff implemented and dealing with the culture and politics of the whole thing.
Mhm.
So I owe a great debt to Mike, and he's a nice guy too. Lastly, but not leastly, someone we
Mhm.
both know.
Yeah, Mr. Eric Bailey. I was just
Yeah.
talking with him this morning, actually.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to him. I was reading an article by him uh, on the GitHub blog about accessibility and AI and how they're implementing or using accessibility AI to
Yeah.
I mean, you're at Microsoft as well. How? how is that how is the AI impinging upon or integrated into your workday?
It is integrated. It is a journey. We are doing, our best, I think. I don't know. Yeah, I have a lot of things that I'm working on to try to both I'm more interested and by interested I mean like that's where like my focus is right now is on trying to make AI understand accessibility concepts a lot better. I don't think there's any doubt that there are absolutely practical benefits of using AI as a tool for people with disabilities. I think that there's a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
products out there that show how it can be useful. But where I think that there still is work, and that's why we are working on it, is to make like code remediation and creation um, have better concepts of what is accessible versus what is not, and that's an interesting thing to work on because with so much of the AI LLM stuff right now, it's all based off from what has what's out there. What have people realized have been good patterns and stuff, and um, for what we were saying before about how definitely accessibility seat at the table is more of an actual seat now, and there's definitely been a lot of strides there. It's still just the internet is just riddled with inaccessible code. And,
Hmm.
if that's what you have your stuff based off from, if that's what it's been trained on, then of course it's going to keep on falling over its two left feet. But I don't know. It's an interesting problem, and I think that Eric and Sarah, I mean, I talk to both of them frequently about how we can try to make this better, and I think that we're all doing the best that we can.
So
So,
how do you use it in your day to day? I mean, what's the
um, I use it in two very different ways. One, to actually make stuff, and I've found decent success with that because I also know, like I've learned very early on. Did I lose you? There you are.
hello
Hello
coming back?
again.
It's something happened.
Yeah, no, I realized that. So this would be a good place to cut.
What?
So this would be a good place to cut. Why don't we yeah, I'll start answering the question now, I guess. Because you had asked like how I use it, how I
Yeah.
use AI. And I was saying that I use it in like two very different ways. And one of them is I use it to make stuff. And I found that as long as you're very thoughtful in the way that you're prompting it and giving it you got to be kidding me, Steve. This is adorable. Oh, he's not going to be on camera or even here. I'm gonna, haha, that is my name. All right, now it's in progress again, so I'll come back on the camera now.
Yeah, excellent.
So
Sorry
should I
about
try
that.
this again
Just
for a third time, or is this
yeah,
basically maybe this is Microsoft actually just being like, do not talk about this?
yeah. Well, they were obviously listening to the Zoom and in real
Mhm.
time
Yeah.
censoring you.
Um, Yeah, no, so I'll try to answer again. So again, I do it in very different ways, and like in one way, I'm writing a lot, and tweaking instructions and documentation to try to teach the AI more about accessibility and code practices. And then, but I also end up making stuff with it as well, and I've found that as long as like you're very methodical and very detailed about what it is you want to make. If you were to just say like, make me this whatever, then it
That's
will
what I
just
do.
go off and will just be like, "Bleh."
Yeah,
But if you are like, I need it to do X, Y, Z, here, like, the accessibility requirements, here's the UX that I want, here's like this, that, and the other thing. Like if you tell it everything that you wanted to do, it will generally do it. I mean, it's
generally, yeah.
yeah, it then just becomes like, well, how, you know, is this something that can be used outside of like demonstrative purposes? Like a lot of the stuff that I do is for demonstrative purposes. I know a lot of people, also use it to help actually build like applications and stuff. And um, to be fair, I'm not saying that it can't be done, but I think that there's even a lot more thought and effort that needs to go into that because otherwise, I've seen examples of where you're like, oh, I want to make this new component for this page, and it will do it, but that doesn't mean it will necessarily work well with all the other components that have been made.
Yeah,
It really has to understand the structure that it's in, and that can be done, but it's a different type of work to make that work right. You can do it all yourself, and that will take X amount of time, or you can use AI to help you build it. It might take a shorter amount of time, but then it's going to take longer to make sure that it really does what it needs to do, and that it's performant and accessible, and this, that, and the other thing. So, um, I don't know. It's the future, so whether we like it or not, it's kind of like I would rather be on the side of trying to make it good than just put my hands up.
yeah, yeah. No, no, I understand. It's just such a it's it's a environment, or like the concept and the technology is very divisive though, because a lot of people are just don't like it
Hmm.
for various reasons. It's very much aligned with fascism as far as I can see.
I
It's
mean,
well, it's aligned with capitalists,
yeah.
capitalists who have no sense of society, or the society that actually means people like you and I can you know not just you and I, but other people that can live a reasonable life. I don't think they give a fuck about
Mhm.
that,
No,
unfortunately.
it's
I'm not
I
talking about any particular company. I'm just
no, no,
talking
no,
about
no, 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 and I'm not right now either. But I think it's a very interesting world that we live in right now, where we can see where the future's going and the pros and cons of it. And I think that right now is the time where really people need to like it's one of those things where like people are like, don't just come to me with problems, but come to me with solutions, sort of thing. And I'm not saying that everyone needs to have a solution for this, but I think it's one of those things where you can't just say that you don't like it. I think it's like if you don't like it, then you also kind of need to like have an idea of like, well, what could make it better? Because right now, like that's what like it's being defined,
yeah,
and you can either just be completely against it and that's your right, but if you want it to be better, then now's the time to say things. I mean,
yeah.
this
Well,
it
that's why I've engaged with it. That's why I
yeah.
use it to find out what can be done. But unfortunately, I think that I need to get involved in more complex uses of it. I mean, I use it. I mean, I found it really useful just for creating. It's what I tend to do is ask, I get it to create a script, a Python script that I could run locally. So,
Mhm.
and it's, just to do stuff with like files or whatever, or just to organize certain things. And I found it really useful that way. And also it's meant that I create one thing and then I only go back to the LLM, the chatbot or whatever, if it's not working. So
Mhm.
then if it's not working, I'll say, this error comes up. And it'll say it invariably says, oh, that's it implies that it's your fault that the error is there when often it's
Oh,
not, which I find really annoying.
oh, I will call it out for that shit. I'll be like,
I call it out, but I did,
listen here, fucker. Like you did this.
yeah. But the thing is that I don't want to I don't want to anthropomorphize because I really don't believe that it has intelligence. I don't believe it's sentient in any way. It's just what I've got to the point now where I think it's just another software tool.
It is a
It's
tool. I think that's
you
the best
know
way to think about it. And that's the
yeah
way I wish that people would think about it, is that it is a tool. That's any tool can be useful, and also any tool can be problematic if you use it in the wrong way. That's why there's a difference between a fucking hammer, a saw, and a screwdriver.
yeah true. But everybody thinks, well, people tend to push the idea that it can be that, it's the solution to all our problems. It's a hammer for everything, and it ain't. I mean, that's why I keep asking, people, show me, show me how it improves accessibility, sort of like automated accessibility testing of things that we can't or that we don't already automate. How does it improve on say Axe or some other rule set?
Mhm.
And I haven't really seen, well, I haven't seen any any evidence to say, well, now we can, things that we had to do by hand before, we can now do automatically. Maybe you have because you're in a, more sophisticated organization than me sitting here,
With your chairs on fire. Yeah.
yeah, sort of,
I mean, that's to be fair, you actually could really level up your working area if you were to put out those flames behind you. It must be very hot.
it's extremely comfortable here.
Really? Well, I mean,
Yeah, I'm
each their
protected
own.
by the
I like the AC on as cold as it can be. It's very much very different for my wife and I. She wants it warm. I just want to be freezing.
yeah. Well, I'm the
So,
same.
yeah.
I
Well, it
like
also just, works out for my cold dead heart.
oh
Um,
fucking cold heart. That's the problem with you. You try to say that you've got a
there's
cold
only
heart,
one.
and you don't. You're fucking softy, mate.
Hmm.
But
Anyway,
that's okay. That's what I like about you.
no, there's to actually answer your question though, to not just make it deflected with jokes, which is what I like to do. Um, there are I'm not going to get into it too much, but like there actually is some benefit that I've seen of where, very very targeted use of LLM on top of programmatic detections
Yeah,
can bring in some context that wouldn't have otherwise been there.
yeah. And I
It's,
think
there's still a lot more work that needs to be done, but I've also seen a lot of gains within the last, what, year even, that
yeah,
just seemed impossible before. I mean, I think there was like maybe a blog post that I wrote like a year and a half, 2 years ago where I was basically like, it can't do anything. And I don't feel the same way anymore. Although I
Well,
will also say there's still so much more that needs to be improved on.
I mean, I continue to tout that article I wrote a year or so ago about the WCAG and what can be tested manually and
Mhm.
what can be tested. And I would love, some of those things to be able to be improved or uh, resolved or test to be able to be tested with um, it does have to be, but making more stuff automatically testable by whatever route. But I just haven't seen it in action yet, and from what I've tried myself, I haven't really seen it evident. But I know that there are others that are working on it that are much more sophisticated than my uh, understanding is, and that yeah, it could be. But I'm still look. When I see it, I'll be happy.
Have you looked into I've helped a little bit with this, but this is Michael Fairchild has been doing the LM eval
Yeah,
projects. He is if I can throw out another name here, you should talk to him at some point. He is a delightful human and is incredibly intelligent and has been doing a lot of work to try to help, make
is
things
this
more
Morgan?
accessible here at
Is it
Microsoft.
Morgan? No, Morgan Fairchild's an actor, a female actor. It's what's
No,
his name?
Michael Fairchild. He was at
Michael
DQ for a
Fairchild.
while. He was, in
Did he
uh,
used to work for
education
DQ?
before. What's that?
Did he what used to work for DQ?
Yeah, for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then he came over to Microsoft maybe a year or two after I did. But
And
I
yeah, I
think,
know that he's been doing some sort of uh, benchmarking. I haven't
yeah.
really looked at it yet. I need to. One of the things that I've done is I submitted an application for XSBTO on the subject of AI and accessibility testing. And so, like, chances are I won't get chosen because I've got form, but if I do, like I want to work up a presentation about accessibility testing and AI
Mhm.
and to help sort of make it to help explore it. Because I think, well, as you know, work for an accessibility company and we're going to have customers well, we already do have customers that
Mhm.
use AI and want to integrate into their workflow or whatever. So, hell. Sorry, I just noticed all this. When I have a beard, I'd scratch myself and I just get scurf coming onto my, yeah. I'm falling apart, man. I'm just an old man. Um,
Yeah, I'm wearing a hat because I haven't had a haircut in a long time, and I don't want
why are
to.
you wearing a hat?
Because I haven't had a haircut in a long time, and it's all getting all
Well, at least you
gray
still
and
got
stuff.
hair. That's something I can say as well. Still got hair.
Yeah, we still got hair, but it is unkempt at this point.
Yeah.
So
Well, but you've got a nicer beard than I. I mean, mine just looks like it's sort of some sort of pubic sort of growth area. Yours actually looks like a beard. Anyway, uh, there are many things that I could still discuss with you, Scott,
oh,
but
I'm
we've been
sure.
going for an hour and a half now, so
Only
approximately.
been an hour and a half.
Yeah, well, with the downtime, but I will. Well, I'll use my editing chops, which are minimal, to make it seem as though the downtime never happened.
Yeah.
Uh, when am I going to see you next? That's all I want to know.
That is a great question. I don't get out much, honestly.
Yeah,
Truly, like it was like before COVID, I had, started doing speaking gigs and stuff, and then COVID hit, and I was just like, you know what, I like not going anywhere.
going. Yeah,
Um, I mean, I would love to, go to like accessibly Toronto again. And I'll try to, I think. But it's I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you can have similar understanding of like, like my kids are at the age right now where like there's just a lot going on with them and
Yeah. Yeah,
weekends are
no,
just
no.
constantly packed up, and if it comes down to like I can go away or I can stay here and see them do like one of their activities or just be around
Sure.
them, I'm always going to do that. Um, I'm always going to pick my kids over this other
Over.
stuff. I think that was actually one of the best things that happened in COVID is actually I think I was putting too much of myself into work, and it really kind of broke me down and made me realize like stop it. you know
Yeah.
and so like I've prioritized outside of work. It's
Well,
for
I mean, it's good that you got it. You work in a company and you feel that you can,
yeah, I mean
because not
it's
every company. So you
no.
haven't been token maxing then.
Not so much, no. But I mean, I just mean that, really over the last few years, if there was anybody that was actually, paying attention to me online, you've probably noticed that I'm barely online anymore. I
Yeah,
do a lot of stuff over, in standards and but I actually do less than I did before, and it's just because, I'm working, I'm doing my job, I'm doing as much as I can outside of that, and then but
sure.
then when workday's done, I'm done too.
But that doesn't mean you can't come to XSPTO and have a good time.
No,
I
and you
mean,
know what?
of course. I mean, I perfectly understand if you're not going to be there. I was talking
No,
to.
I actually do because I can also make I can make an excuse out of it to go see my sister that lives up in Toronto because
Oh,
she's the smart
perfect.
one era, and she got up there. She doesn't live
Yeah,
anymore.
got out before Gilead. Um, Scott, it's wonderful to see you as always,
You
and
too.
thank you for today. Remember to choose an item from HZZ, and yeah, send me a pic if once once you get it, send me a pic of you wearing it. I like that. I, yeah, it's
Thank
one
you,
of my.
Steve.
Well, what I do is I sit on the toilet in strange places and look at the pictures of people wearing
Yeah,
those.
that's exactly why I want you to have a photo of me so you can be like, oh, Scott.
Yeah.
Then you can
Thanks,
put
Scott.
me on your
I
shit list
appreciate
now.
it. And we should talk more.
We'll see about
Yeah. Fuck
that.
you, man. See you later, Scott.
Take care, Steve.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.